love the gospel of the Lord.
Heart to Heart, a Catholic media ministry, presents an inspiring gospel reflection by Father Michael Sparrow. Father Michael is a Jesuit priest working as a writer and retreat master at the Bellarmine Jesuit Retreat House outside Chicago.
Our reading today is taken from Psalm 8. Lord our God, the whole world tells the greatness of your name. Your glory reaches beyond the stars. Even the babble of infants declares your strength, your power to halt the enemy and avenger. I see your handiwork in the heavens, the moon and the stars you set in place. What is humankind that you remember them? The human race that you care for them? You treat them like gods, dressing them in glory and splendor. You give them charge of the earth, laying all at their feet. Cattle and sheep, wild beasts, birds of the sky, fish of the sea, every swimming creature. Lord our God, the whole world tells the greatness of your name. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I'm standing outside in the grounds of our Bellarmine Retreat House here in beautiful Barrington. And the trees are flowering right now. And I wanted to stand outside and speak to you on this week where we commemorate the 5th anniversary of Laudate Si, and a week that's called Laudate Si Week. Pope Francis used his Wednesday address to talk about the awe and majesty of the gift of creation. So I thought it appropriate that I be outside as I address you. There's something so powerful and so healing about being in communion with nature. Recently, I've read a number of articles where the psychologists are beginning to say, yes, we need to practice social distancing, but it's not a good thing to spend too much time indoors. Get outside. Duh. Who doesn't know that? If we simply stay inside, we get cabin fever and we start to go stir crazy. When the weather has been warming up, how wonderful it is to be able to get outside. And it's no accident that Bellarmine is built on almost 90 acres of nature, so that when our retreatants come here, you can go outside and experience the gift of creation. There's just something so human about being in communion with nature and experiencing the presence of God. When we look at the magnificent varieties of vegetation, of trees and flowers and animal life. When we look up at the sky, the beauty of the sky, the ever-changing sky during the day and the magnificence of the night sky. If you're familiar with the story of St. Ignatius, you'll remember that as a young man, early on in his conversion experience, he used to just go up on the roof and look up at the night sky and just stare at the stars in wonder. And then he'd do the same thing in a day of looking up at the ever-changing landscape of the clouds. It filled his heart with a sense of the awe and majesty of God and the immensity of creation. Pope Francis made that connection and he said, remember that the Bible begins with the book of Genesis, and the book of Genesis begins with the story of creation. He said, this is one magnificent epic hymn of praise. Because God looks on what God has created and says what? It is good. When we focus on the problems, when we focus on the difficulties, we can get so depressed. But when we take the time to smell the flowers, to look around at the beauty of nature, it lifts our spirits. Pope Francis also reflected in his address on Psalm 8. Take some time to read that beautiful psalm. The author looks up at the night sky, looks around at the diversity of creation, and is humbled and is awed by what God has created. And the psalmist says, "Who are we that you would make us little less than gods? You put us in charge of this creation." Pope Francis said, "Are we doing a good job of caring for creation? I don't think so. We need to do a better job of caring for our common home and being in communion with it, taking the time to walk around, to look and to see the beauty that surrounds us." Pope Francis also makes this important point, that the book of Genesis was written in the time of the exile of the Jewish people. There was no temple. There was no social structure, no religious cult at that time. They were in exile. They were slaves. And in the midst of that, the story of creation is written, this cause of hope, that even in our darkest hour, God is there with us. This Sunday, we celebrate in most of the dioceses around the country the Feast of the Ascension. And the Gospel is the close of Matthew's Gospel, and it has this powerful promise, the very closing line of Matthew's Gospel. Jesus saying, "Behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the world." Now that's a promise to hold on to. Jesus saying, "I am with you always. Whatever happens, in the good times and in the hard times, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to be there with you." It's his promise of being Emmanuel. The promise that was given to him when he was, even before he was born, that he will be Emmanuel, God with us. That's the closing words of Matthew's Gospel. Jesus saying, "I am with you always." That's the cause of our hope, that the Lord is not going to abandon us. And so Pope Francis ends his address by saying, we Christians are called to be the bearers of hope. Prayer is the first force of hope. Prayer is what strengthens us. Prayer is what unites us. So let's take some time to enter into what Matthew Kelly calls the classroom of silence. Go into deep in the sanctuary of our own soul, having absorbed the beauty of nature, take some time to reflect on it. St. Ignatius again encourages us, take some time every day to just reflect on your day, the beauty that you've seen, to be able to shed the problems and touch that place of hope. Prayer is the first force of hope, and we Christians are called to be the bearers of that hope. Amen? Amen.
Heart